everyone, it's DJ, and welcome to another episode of RC Retirement. This is going to be a reshoot episode. This is a reshoot of the learning episode for how to read an Army National Guard retirement point statement. The original version did not show a visual aid. It only gave you the opportunity to download a sample of the National Guard statement and follow along. Well, this time I'm going to actually show the sample statement as I go through the same script I used before, but this time I will let you see the National Guard statement, and hopefully that will improve the learning for everybody rather than just watching me talk as we go through the video. And I'm actually going to do that for every retirement point statement video that I have produced in the past. So without further ado, let's jump in. Be prepared for the same video I shot before, just a slightly different version visually, and let's proceed. Let's talk about a skill that everyone in the Army National Guard should have. In addition to being able to read your own Leave and Earnings Statement, or LES for short, everyone in the Army National Guard should be able to understand their own retirement point statement as well. This is going to be kind of a long episode, so you might want to take it in little chunks so that you can better comprehend it. But why, DJ? I'm only going to be in the National Guard for a few years and then I'm getting out. Well, this statement tells you more than just what you're going to earn in a monthly pension if you stay for 20 years. It also tells you if you are eligible for other types of benefits. I'm going to do a separate episode later on about those types of benefits. For now, let's just focus on the retirement and pension side of things, and we can talk about the other stuff later. Let me say from the outset that this episode will be much easier to understand if you have your own point statement in front of you. If you do not have one, be sure to ask your full-time staff at your unit for a copy. They should have the ability to pull that statement for you. It is also possible to find a copy in your own electronic personnel record, or IPERMS, as it's called for Army service members. Now, there are several types of point statement available in the Army National Guard, and I'll run through real quickly what those are. There are two major types that you'll see. The first one is called the NGB Form 23 Alpha, which shows not only your total retirement points, but also an estimate of what your retired pay and the number of drill and active duty days that you served in the last year are. Personally, I don't like this version very much, particularly because it shows a retired pay estimate that is based on some faulty assumptions. And I won't go into what those assumptions are. Let's just say that the pay estimate it gives you is a bit inflated, and I don't like giving people faulty numbers. The good part about it is it gives you a drill history, and that's good for checking up on a good audit at the end of the year. But other than that, I don't really care for the thing. The next version is called the NGB Form 23 Bravo, and that is just a statement of your retirement points. I like this version the most. If you're familiar with the old show Dragnet, it is just the facts, ma'am. And that is what I am after, at least, in this game. Just the facts. I'm going to put a link in the show notes to a handy how to read guide that will be useful to you. I will also be using this guide in my talk about how to understand your points. In fact, I'm going to be using it line by line. If you don't have a copy of your personal retirement point statement, there's also a link to a sample point statement which you can put alongside this guide and hopefully gain a better understanding on how to read this important document. In fact, what's always been useful for any class I've given is to have this how to read guide and either this sample statement and your own statement and just put them together. The how to read guide and your own statement and put them side by side. It makes things a lot clearer. All right, so let's begin. Let's just look at that how to read guide, which you've had on the screen now for a while and just been staring at it. Good old Gumby D. Clayboy up here. So the top left corner of your point statement shows some pertinent information about you. You will see your rank and full name, your last 4 digits of your social security number. The older version shows the full version of your SSN. You'll also see the name, address, identification code, and payroll number of your current National Guard unit, and that's easy enough to understand. All of that right here in the left-hand corner. Now let's move over to the right. This area contains a great deal of useful information that is very often overlooked by service members. The first 2 items are simple enough. They are the date the statement was prepared and the reason for doing so, usually upon request. Next, we will see a lot of acronyms, codes, and numbers. This is usually a point of confusion for service members, and as a result, it's ignored. This is actually a very important section. The third line is called AYE. This is Anniversary Year Ending Date. And to translate that into English, it means the date on which your particular unique period for earning retirement points will end. The anniversary year is not a calendar year or a fiscal year. It is different for every member of a reserve component, and this is something to keep in mind whenever you are determining whether you will have enough time to earn a good year or a qualifying year for retirement or not. The first 2 digits are a month and the second 2 are a day. So in this case, this guy's anniversary year ending date are December 10th. The next line says BASD, Bravo Alpha Sierra Delta. This stands for Basic Active Service Date. If you were on an active duty status when the statement was prepared, there would be a date here. If you were not in an active duty status, in other words, a normal part-time drilling soldier, there will be no date here. So this particular individual was a drilling soldier when this statement was prepared. The BASD reflects a compilation of all of your prior active duty service, and again, if you're on active duty, reflects the date when your active duty service would have begun if you had been on continuous active duty. For those active guard / reserve soldiers who may be reading this statement and are wondering when they would be eligible for a regular retirement, meaning an active duty retirement, just add 20 years to the BASD and you have your answer. don't worry about this date if you're a drilling soldier, because you have different rules. Now, the next line is very important for all service members. It says notice of eligibility, and it will say yes or no. This tells you whether you have a 20-year letter, or more officially, a notice of eligibility for retired pay, and whether or not it's been issued to you or not. That's redundant. But anyway, if the line says yes, and you do not have a copy of this letter, then you should check your electronic personnel record or your personal records. It should be there somewhere. If it is not, ask your full-time staff to request a copy of it from your state's Retirement Points Accounting Manager, or RPAM NCO. This letter will be very important to you in the future. See my episode on the 20-year letter for more information. I've got a link to it in the show notes. The next line is highest grade held, right here. This line should be either your current pay grade, or if you held a higher grade in the past, such as enlisted men who were commissioned officers or warrant officers at one point in their career. If you have not been reduced for punitive reasons, that higher grade will show up and you can be eligible for that grade when you apply for retired pay. If you were reduced for punitive reasons, that higher grade will not show up on this line. All right. I know one individual, just to give you an example, who was a major and resigned his commission. He came back as an enlisted member and became a Sergeant First Class, an E7. He was later reduced to a Staff Sergeant, an E6, for misconduct. And a few months later, he was reduced again to an E5. Well, the highest grade held on his point statement now says E5, not 04. And it will never again say 04 because he was reduced for misconduct. So there's a little hint for everybody to keep your noses clean if you held a higher grade, because it can cost you significantly if you were to get into any sort of punitive action. In this case, that guy lost a lot of money for whatever reason led to that punitive action. All right, moving on. The final line in the top right corner shows two critical elements of information. The first is RPED, Romeo Papa Echo Delta, or Retired Pay Eligibility Date. For most of us, the date shown here will be our 60th birthday. For those of us eligible for reduced retirement age, the date should show us when we should be eligible for retired pay before 60. And you should contact your unit full-time staff if you have qualifying active duty and your RPED still shows your 60th birthday. Next to the retired pay eligibility date, you should see a number and PDS. This is the number of qualifying 90-day periods of active duty you have. Each period should result in a 3-month reduction in your RPED, or RPED, as I call it. Again, if you have qualifying active service and believe this number is not correct, contact your full-time staff. I know this is a lot so far, but don't worry, it's going to get a lot easier and faster from here on out. This is just the header information, and it's going to move a whole lot faster from here on. All right, so just to wrap up the header, especially this reduced retirement pay info, if you have 2 periods of qualifying periods up here, if you have 2 qualifying periods, that should be a 6-month reduction in your retired pay eligibility date, just as a review. All right, so let's move on. Let's move down this statement a little bit. Let's look at begin date right here. The first 2 columns that we want to review are begin date and end date. That part's pretty obvious. The first entry should be the time at which you first joined the military, right there. And that's when you first joined the military in any status. So if you joined as delayed entry program or whatever, any status whatsoever, that should be reflected here. Even if you were not in a paid military status yet, that should be reflected there. Entries in these columns are usually, but not necessarily, in 1-year increments. Whether or not they're full years depends on what you will see in the next column, or the MIMSI, or Military Membership Status Identifier column. Whenever your status changes, the MIMSI column changes. And let's just go ahead and talk about that column. The Military Membership Status Identifier, in layman's terms, is just a code for whatever status you happen to be at the time. Don't worry about remembering all the codes, because the NGB 23 or the RPAM statement, if you want to make it simpler, gives you a legend at the bottom of your statement for every code that shows up at the bottom of your particular statement. In fact, I'll just scroll down to the bottom of this guy's statement, and you can see that every statement that showed up on his is reflected here. So you don't have to worry about trying to remember what all these little D1s and A7s mean, because there's a legend here to help you read it. So don't worry about all those. It's there for you. It's there to help you read it. All right. So there's a legend there to help you understand it. Now let's get into the real meat of this thing. The next 3 columns across the top are IDT, MEM, and ACCP. These stand for, respectively, inactive duty training, membership points, and Army Correspondence Course Program, and other distance learning points. These 3 columns are collectively categorized as inactive duty training, or IDT points. The IDT column shows your drill points during any given time. So at any point for any date range, like for right here, for March through July, the IDT column shows 16 drill points for this guy. The membership column shows the number of membership points you earned during this period. And you normally earn up to 15 membership points for each full year in a reserve component. The ACCP column shows the number of points you earned from the completion of military distance learning courses, divided by 3, since you earn 1 point for every 3 hours of correspondence learning. Now let's do an experiment. Add the number of points from IDT, MEM, and ACCP in a time frame. And I have a table that is in my script here. It's a limit to the number of points you can earn. And rather than flash it up on the screen, which, well, I'll just go ahead and do that. I'll flash it up on the screen. All right, and I'll go ahead and read it for you as well. So, from 1946 to 23 September 1996, the limit to how many IDT points a soldier could earn was 60. From 24 September 1996 to 30 October 2000, the IDT limit was 75. From 30 October 2000 to 29 October 2007, the IDT limit was 90. And from 30 October 2007 to present day, the IDT limit was 130. And that is within a retirement year, not a fiscal year and not a calendar year. So within your own retirement year, that is the number of IDT points you can earn. All right. And if the total number is greater, then your points from these 3 columns will be reduced down to that particular number. This limit does not apply to other types of points. So now let's move on to the other columns in the statement. The next column you'll see here is FHD. That is Funeral Honors Detail. Now this is technically another type of IDT point, believe it or not, but it is not subject to the limitation that the other IDT points are. And that is primarily because of Congress wanting to encourage participation in funeral honors details with the current operations tempo. So there's no limit on funeral honors detail points. They act like active duty points. There is no limitation except the number of days in a year. So you can keep earning those. And that's simply to encourage people to participate in those details and try to fulfill the number of required funeral honors missions every year. And there are a lot of them. Next we have the active duty points column. This displays the number of active duty points, such as your annual trainings or mobilizations. Moving on, we have the verified status column. This tells you whether the service has been verified by proper documentation or not. If you see a Victor in the column, the period is verified. If you see a Bravo, and I don't see one on here, then it has not been verified. Points with a Bravo in that particular row will not count until the service has been verified. Next, we see total career points and total points for retired pay. The first column shows the number of points you have earned for this particular period. And the second shows the total points after any limits have been applied. Only the total points for retired pay will be used for computing what your retired pay will be. So if you have, let's see if I can find one. If you have one that goes over the point limit, like let's say you are on active duty and for a full year and had 365 active duty points, and like this one, well, he was not a reservist. So if you had 365 active duty points and also 15 membership points, that would be 380 points total, but you cannot have more than 365 points in a year. So it would be reduced down to 365. So you would have 380 career points for that year and 365 retirement points for the year, or career retirement, or qualifying retirement points for the year. At last, we get to creditable service for retired pay. If the time period is a full year and you have at least 50 points for that year, then you will see a 01/00/00 in that column. If the time is less than a year and you have enough points prorated from 50 for that time to count, you will see however many months and days are creditable. If you have a full year and less than 50 points, you will see 00/00/00. This means that particular year will not count for retirement purposes. You haven't lost the points. You can still have those apply for pay if you gain enough points for retirement or enough creditable years for retirement later, but that year will not count toward retirement itself. You still need 20 qualifying years. If the time period is less than a year and your service continues on the next line, you will see -- // This does not mean your service does not count. It simply means your service for that retirement year will continue on the next line. A lot of people panic when they see this. They think it means they have a bad year. This is something you see when a MIMSI code has changed. So every time you see a series of dashes, look at the MIMSI code also. It just means that the MIMSI code changed and everything's continuing on the next line. So don't panic, you're still good. Now let's go all the way down to the bottom of the page, or in some cases to the next page, to the grand totals line. So see, we're actually almost done. We're going all the way down to the grand totals line. Here you'll see the total number of points you earned from active duty service, your total career points, total creditable points for pay purposes, and the total amount of service creditable for retirement purposes. Keep in mind that the last entry above the grand total has 2 dashes in the end date column. The points from that line will not be included in the totals until your retirement date is completed or until you separate from service, whichever comes first. That's because the line right there at the bottom is still in progress. So the statement has not added anything from that current year into any of the numbers in the totals. So you could have all kinds of points in that last line. It's still not included in the totals until that year closes out. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Now let's assume something. I've seen this a lot. Let's assume that you're currently serving and you have your total creditable service equaling 19 years / 11 months / 15 days. This does not mean, let me just go ahead and highlight it right here. Let's say this said 19, 11, 15. That does not mean that you need to only serve 15 more days in order to have 20 creditable years. The database that produces this statement only recognizes full retirement years. So this year up here needs to close out before this will change. It doesn't need to, it's not 15 days that need to pass. It's another full retirement year that needs to close out before that number will change. So that's a misconception that a lot of service members have. A full retirement year needs to be completed before a notice of eligibility or a 20-year letter will be generated for someone in that kind of situation. Finally, we get down to that legend I mentioned, that military membership status identifier section with all the codes defined. And we also see below that a section of non-creditable periods of service. So wherever we saw the MIMSI H3, that was a non-creditable period of service, and there are sometimes other periods like certain types of ROTC cadet, and you would need to worry about that if you were in such a status. And if you have service that qualifies for a reduction in your retirement age, you would see that reflected in qualified service for retired pay eligibility date. And you would see the relevant information reflected there. And hopefully all of that information would be correct as well. If not, you would need to contact your full-time staff and have them go through channels to get that information corrected with your state. All right, believe it or not, that is everything. I hope that has been a nice, quick, understandable introduction for the National Guard retirement point statement. My goal was simply a crash course, not anything too in-depth, too involved and confusing. So if you have any questions, don't have any qualms about emailing me. Of course, there is a how to read guide that goes much deeper into this. You can find that in the show notes. And of course, my email address is at the top of the web page, and I'll just recite it here as well, dj@rcretirement.com. If you have any questions about understanding your own point statement, you can email it to me with your question. I'll try to help you understand it. And of course, another thing you could try to do if you wish is contract me for a webinar with your unit, and I'll teach all of you. All right, so hopefully that was a useful little bit of information for you, and I'll be shooting new videos for the other statements as well, and we'll teach everyone. All right. Thank you for spending your time with me, and thank you for your service. Have a great day.
If you liked what you heard on today's episode, then please go below and give it a thumbs up, and be sure to subscribe to this channel. Also, please let other people know about this channel and the information it can provide for them. If you have questions or comments, then please have no qualms about posting them in the comments section below. Please remember the RC Retirement YouTube channel and the RC Retirement website are not recognized or endorsed by the Department of Defense, the Department of Veterans Affairs, or any other government agency. The information presented in these resources are for entertainment and informational purposes only. Also, the content of either of these resources should not be considered financial or legal advice. Please consult with your own legal counsel, accountant, or financial planner before making any decisions based on what you have learned here. As always, thank you for watching the RC Retirement YouTube channel.